Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly O'Horo, and this is Adaptable, Behavior Explained. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Adaptable. I'm Kelly, and I'm happy to have you here. I'm really pleased to have with us a guest that is such an honor to have on our show today. Her name is Angela, and she is the CEO of the 100 Club here in Arizona. So, Angela, thank you so much for being here. Please introduce yourself.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Kelly. Yes, as you mentioned, my name is Angela Harrell. I'm the CEO for the 100 Club of Arizona, and I help run this nonprofit that helps all of our first responders to every corner of Arizona. And then also we're trying to help others that are just beyond our borders as well.
That's so special. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And I'm really excited about this opportunity to get to know you better in our preparation for the show. And in addition to this experience, I have a feeling we're going to spend a lot more time getting to know each other better because you are just doing such amazing work.
Well, I'm excited about it.
It's so important. Yeah. So what do you hope to gain from this episode specifically by being here with us and knowing that we have a pretty large first responder audience, but also just from mental health in general? What are you hoping to gain, or our viewers to gain for having watched this today?
I think that it would be hugely beneficial for the public to understand the weight of every single call that our first responders go on. So as a community member, you trust in our 911 system, you trust in our police and fire, and you might be having a crisis yourself, and you might need to pick up the phone to call 911. And when you do that, the beauty is they're going to ask you two questions. Where are you and how can we help? They don't care if you're blue or purple, green, black. It doesn't make any difference. Mm-hmm. They're just going to get there as fast as they can.
Right.
And you have trusted in the system enough to invite them into your story in one of the most critical moments, maybe in your life or one that's affecting someone around you. And that trust, I think, is so important because once they're in your story, they're going to help you. They're going to give you the best possible service. Right. They're going to give you everything that they've got to try to get you through or to transition or help solve the situation that you're in and whatever that looks like. And guess what? Then they're going to leave with part of your story. They're going to take a piece of your story with them. And I think that one of the greatest challenges is we don't realize that as community members, that every single call becomes part of a first responder story. Right. And how many pieces, how many nuggets can they toss into that big proverbial backpack before it pulls them over?
Right.
So I want to make sure people understand that we are their backup. Mm-hmm. The 100 Club is the backup to our first responders every day because they need it too.
Right. And I talk about this all the time with people when it comes to capacity and trauma. And I see a lot of first responders personally as a trauma specialist. And we talk about, I love to pay taxes because I understand that I have someone who can show up at my door if I need it, so quickly. And I am grateful to do whatever I can to support that. But when I think about the burden that they carry and their propensity to not want to need help.
Oh, no,
their propensity
for that.
Yeah, they need to hold it all. They've got it. And, unfortunately, oftentimes by the time they end up on one of our couches, it's like their bag is overflowing with that burden. And right. Although they are heroic and their training teaches them to bypass all of the biological norms that say run away from the danger and they are taught run straight toward the danger, I think it's so interesting that they aren't necessarily taught at the get-go that you are just a mammal.
Right. And they're the helpers.
Right.
They are the ones that are supposed to be, they think, supplying the help, not the ones that need help.
Well, and the historical understanding of emotions or falling apart is some kind of weakness, and recognizing that we all have our breaking point.
Absolutely.
And just because they are doing something over and over that adds things to their backpack doesn't mean that they don't need to stop and empty it every once in a while. And I wish that that was more of a known quantity for all of us, but also for first responders themselves, that, you're going to do more to have a burden of trauma because of everything that you see. And please, as part of your, professional plan, also have an active way to download and get rid of the things in your backpack. And so how can we together share with this audience maybe a story or something that really highlights this burden and how the impact is so extensive?
So if you're referring to, let's say, the impact of a call that they go on.
Right.
And, if you think about as an individual, as a community member, whatever your position might be, if you saw a significant accident last month, you're probably still talking about it like, oh, you wouldn't believe what I drove up on, or you wouldn't believe what I saw. And you're talking about something that happened last month or maybe 6 months ago, and you only saw one. Mm-hmm. They might see 3 of those a day.
Right.
And
they don't talk about it.
No, they don't. And sometimes they don't even want to go home and tell their families about it because they don't want to share that burden. They want to carry it personally. And that exists in different ways.
Right.
And depending on how close you are to that call, or maybe something happened to one of their colleagues and they're right there on the precipice, they feel like they have to carry it.
Right. Mm-hmm. And they, like you said, they don't want to burden others with it. And truthfully, their families didn't sign up to hear the download of all of the trauma they saw that day. So they feel so very alone.
Yes. And they're the protectors.
Right.
They're the helpers. They're the protectors. So you know what they're doing? They're attempting to protect their loved ones. They're attempting to help their loved ones. But in doing so, they're putting their own experiences aside.
Right.
Yeah.
And what are some of the consequences that come with this burden for them that you've experienced and seen over the years?
Oh, they compartmentalize. They attempt to leave things at work, which, how can you do that? I mean, if you were to see a dismembered body or a deceased child, I mean, how do you put that away and not take it home and keep it from waking you up in the middle of the night?
And should we?
Yes. No. Gosh, no. You have to unpack that somewhere.
Right. We talk about, when it comes to generationally trauma, and I was thinking about veterans where, for example, in World War II, the people talk about why are the men today who come back from war less resilient? And I don't think that that's the case. I think that the men that came back from war back in, for example, the World War II era, got to sit on a ship for 2 weeks on their way back and talk and cry and share. And today, it's so fast, and we plop them back into their lives because of, air transport, and nobody gets to digest and download all that information. And I think in many, many ways, first responders have it far worse because they never come off the line.
You bring up a good point. They had that time to decompress together, or to share the stories, or to at least talk through some of the items. And that is the beauty in the fire service. So as a firefighter, you're working with a crew, right? The joke is, eating together, sleeping together, working out together. We're just kidding, of course. But they're all sharing a space. And with that, they have a lot of overlap. They're going to break bread. They're going to talk about the calls. They're going to do those things. Whereas in the policing world or in law enforcement, you're often working independently.
Right.
And you're going to go from this call to that call alone.
Back in the car.
Right back in the car alone. And then you got to go to the next one and pretend that one is kind of put away and it's behind you. And you are already trying to face yet another item or another situation solo.
Right. And I think that police oftentimes have it so much worse than fire in the way that we call fire when we're in this desperate crisis, medical, fire, things like that. We don't call fire when someone's at my door because I think I'm going to be, shot or I've been mugged or whatever. We call police for that. And so they're also exposed to kind of the most troubled of our society who have, for whatever their own reasons, whether it's mental health or, trauma, which oftentimes is the predication of crime, and socioeconomic deficiency and things like that. But that's what they're exposed to day in and day out. And so they also have no choice but to be even less optimistic because that's what they're exposed to all day, just as an occupational hazard.
In the fire service, you're always almost very welcome, and they're helping maybe with a medical situation, whereas the interactions of the public with law enforcement, they are not always positive. They're being called to a criminal situation, or there's a problematic area that they have to focus on, or you're getting pulled over and getting reminded that you need to drive better, or you got a ticket and people are like, I got a ticket. Well, be glad you didn't get a ticket every time, every time that you were speeding, because the reality is even as adults, we need to be held accountable, and we don't really like it that much.
No,
we don't. Like
and we're not thinking in that moment, thank goodness that the decision to speed didn't cause an accident that hurt or harmed someone else or myself.
Correct.
And the potential collateral. And so they are protecting us, even though it doesn't feel that way when you get in trouble.
Right.
But it's also very clear. There's signs everywhere to tell us what we need to do to maintain
Absolutely.
safety.
And you talk about maintaining safety and being accountable. And, some of us learn this the hard way, but even going hiking in Arizona, making responsible actions.
Right.
Because if you are not responsible and you don't bring enough water, let's say, or you don't know your path that you're supposed to stay on, you could be putting a first responder's life in jeopardy.
Right.
And you don't think about that when it's just you and a friend going out for a hike, or you and your spouse or something like that. You don't think of the grave consequences that could happen if you are not in the best physical condition, or if you need help from a first responder.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about a personal story that really preempted your role in the 100 Club and everything that you do for us as a community now, and for that community specific, if you don't mind.
I started my professional career as a special agent for the federal government, and it was a wonderful decade that I spent. And during that time, I had met a wonderful gentleman who I in turn married, who was a police officer, a firefighter, and a paramedic. Just one guy, not three. And we got married, and it was wonderful and beautiful. But I was working in the field of law enforcement, and as was he, but also in the fire service, because he was working on a rescue helicopter for the state of Arizona. And an unfortunate turn of events, he happened to be doing a rescue of 2 lost and dehydrated stranded hikers up on Bear Mountain in Sedona. And during that rescue, he was fatally wounded. And it was a situation that was very unique. It was truly an accident, and it changed the course of, obviously, my life and my children's life, and the life of those first responders that were very close to the situation or witnessed that tragedy. So
can we just pause right there for a second? Because I think that most people, you're so poised. I know that you've done so much therapy to move through your personal experience, and I'm sure it still haunts you in ways that we could not understand, not having been through such a tragedy personally. But I think that it bears note for people to just take a moment and think about that. He went to work one day and he didn't come home, and it changed the life of your children and of you in a way that you never saw coming and couldn't possibly plan for.
No, I didn't even worry.
Right.
Many spouses of law enforcement or fire, they worry, what if they don't come home?
Well, you were in badassery yourself.
Yeah.
So you had your own compartmentalization skill set going. And of course.
And there's this old TV show, I joke about it a little bit, but I don't know if anybody remembers, it's called ER. So it is
I think it might still be on.
I hope so. I love it. I don't know why I don't watch it anymore, but it's a medical trauma kind of show. And I remember there was one episode where I used to force my husband to sit next to me on the couch because I loved it. And he's like, this isn't real. It doesn't really happen like that. And I'm like, I understand. Just sit here and listen and watch with me. And it happened to be an episode where a helicopter came in and landed on top of the hospital. And the chief of surgery came running out, and he got too close to the tail rotor, and it took off his arm just like that. And I went, and I looked over at my spouse, and he goes, never going to happen. And that was it. That was that moment. And from that, I never thought about it again. Yeah. Because never going to happen. And the situation, of course, that ultimately followed that was he was struck by the helicopter rotor blade, not the tail rotor, but the top rotor during this rescue. So again, a complete fluke.
Right.
That no one would have ever imagined, especially those that were the pilot. They were that close to it. The individuals that he rescued, one of them was an ER nurse for almost 3 decades. And they were also so surprised that this situation could occur. But as a result of that, there was another individual, a colleague, that was asked to do the unthinkable. And that unthinkable was to go up to the top of that mountain and put his friend in a body bag. And he did it without question. So a friend, a colleague, someone who, a true peer, and he did it. But that's a burden he had to carry, and he had to carry it for a long time. And in a beautiful way, he did it. He was an honor guard, right? He was an honor guard representative. So he always looked shiny. The badge is shiny, the boots are shiny, and everything was really, really outwardly perfect.
The pomp and circumstance.
Yes, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
And every 3 weeks after the accident, he called and checked on me almost like clockwork.
Wow.
I was so fascinated because I was like, oh, that's really nice of you. And, he had his own struggles and all these things were going on. And, there was a spouse, well, not a spouse, actually, like baby mama. And then there was the ex-baby mama, it's just one of those things, and financial concerns. And so we talked every 3 weeks for almost 2 years. And he did not show up to the annual hike that we hold in honor of my late husband on year number 2. He said he had called, though, and had this terrible reception situation with the cell phone. And he was like, hey, Ange, I just wanted to check on you and the kids. Sorry I can't be there. I always wanted to go see the EMS memorial. I go, hey, it's no big deal. Fine. Totally great. Thanks for calling. And he's like, what have you been up to? And I said, well, actually, I just started helping the 100 Club to develop a suicide awareness program for public safety. And he goes, you what? I said, well, I'm working on this suicide awareness program for, police and fire. And he goes, I'm sorry, we have a terrible connection. And I could hear him loud and clear. And he said, take care, Ange. And he hung up the phone. And so it was 2 years and 5 days to the date of my husband's accident that he took his own life. He already had a plan. I am not saying that it was the idea of having to go up and put a friend, a peer, an individual, colleague into a body bag that was the precipice for that. But I will say that cumulative piece, the stressors, financial stressors, relationship stressors, stressors of having children and the dynamic that proposes, combined with all of the calls, that cumulative piece can be a burden that some can't imagine carrying.
I just can't imagine, and the vicarious trauma that he experienced, and probably trying to minimize his experience of it because he wasn't the one that died.
Right.
And at the same time, not being able to get, the images and the thoughts and all of that out of his head, and that it's an impossible thing to imagine.
We'll never know.
And you now, lose 2 people to this accident. And because of decisions that community members make, they didn't plan that.
No.
And there wasn't any planning, and people are, it won't happen to me, so I'm going to go for this hike on a hot day, and I'm not going to bring enough water.
And the other part is we see 2 deaths associated with that. Luckily, there weren't more.
Right.
Okay, the pilot was fine, the hikers were okay.
That we know of.
And that's the other side of it, that I think about all of the relationships that have dissolved.
Oh, yeah.
Of those individuals that were the closest to him. So divorce, challenges, just moving forward, forever moving forward.
Right.
Because your perspective just as a human is affected.
Right.
And what was once no big deal, now is a huge deal. And that's a lot to navigate.
What are some of the things that you've done to just work through and move through your own experience of that trauma? For viewers who don't really understand that there could be another side, like you can get through these travesties and get to the other side, what are things that you have done and continue to do, I imagine, to help you be resilient? I mean, obviously the giving back with the 100 Club.
Yes. Mine is a little less traditional, in that I have a significant gratitude practice. And if I'm ever in a place where I'm like, okay, this is tough, I am going to try to give to others. I'm going to try to go the extra mile and write a thank you note, or go engage somebody that I haven't talked to in a long time, just to have conversation, to just kind of breathe life back into where you are. But again, trying to figure out how to just simply make it better for the next. not that there was a problem or there were challenges that were really overwhelming, but making sure that if you do come across something that you think can be improved upon, then do that. And I say do that. So when the accident had happened, you know, DPS was great. They showed up at my house and they sat down with me every single morning and helped me plan. And being in my mid-30s and having 2 little kids, I never imagined in my wildest dreams I'd be planning a funeral for their father, for my spouse. But DPS accompanied me every single morning. But for some reason, I became very laser focused on our health insurance because we carried it through his employer. So I asked them every morning, I'm like, you know, are our benefits okay? Like our insurance, they're like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. That was Tuesday morning. He was killed on a Monday afternoon. Wednesday morning, I just asked the same question. I don't know why. Sometimes you're in a fog.
Sure.
But
when you're just starting to look at what can I control? What can I do?
100%. So I kept asking the question, well, on Friday morning, there was a new person in the room and I asked the same question. They said, yes, I'm sorry, it's the end of the pay period. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like, it's just over? Like, there's no health insurance? Like, my son loves to defy gravity at every opportunity. He has
Sounds like he may not come by that.
Oh my gosh.
Apples and trees,
That's true. That's true. Yeah. And to this day, it could be dirt bikes. It could be anything. You name it. This kid. Oh, I love him, but geez. So, I just was in complete disbelief that they would turn off our insurance and then having to go to Cobra at $1,900 a month and how hard that was. So I said, you know what, we're going to fix this. And they got a little scared. They're like, oh no, there's nothing, you know, a widow who's hurt and passionate and whatever.
Yeah, stay out of her way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it took almost 2 years, but we were able to pass some legislation known as Harrell's Law after my late husband that allows families to continue to participate in the insurance option that's offered by their respective agency if there's a line of duty death. Wow. So that is my example in that you can take the tragedy that you're experiencing or the challenge or the adversity that you face, take that adversity and use it to empower you to make it better for the next.
We call that the meaning making phase. And truthfully, that comes usually a little bit later than right after, you know, right following the aftermath of whatever the tragedy is, because there's all of those experience. I mean, you know, we turn into a human doing oftentimes to get out of the feeling and being. And so did the experience of what happened to you from that emotional place, aside from shock and doing, did that happen before you went into action or did it happen after? Because it really happens to all of us.
I would say you just alluded to you're trying to control something when all of a sudden nothing is, you realize that you're really not in control. I became overtly concerned about safety for my kids. Like I needed to have the safest car.
Right. The adaptation is I'm not going to lose another person.
Yeah. I'm going to figure out how to protect this nucleus because I didn't focus as much on it previously, which I'm glad.
Sure.
Because that would
Dress rehearsing tragedy doesn't prevent it from happening.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
It gives us an outlet to deal with our anxiety, but it doesn't actually prevent anything.
Right. So I would say, you know, you said human doing versus human being. And I was like, oh, that's cute. I've never heard that before, but it's so accurate.
It's so true.
So I just was, again, trying to broadly focus on how can I help others to not have to experience what I'm experiencing. But then later, leaning in even more significantly into the 100 Club to be able to provide guidance and create connection with our surviving family members. But I also have an interesting perspective in that from a line of duty death family member, I know how they will be taken care of and or how they won't.
Right.
But I also see personally those that are suffering from injuries or other catastrophic situations or other familial situations, how they don't get what they need, how they don't get the attention, the focus, the help. We provide the financial support, and we also offer all of the wellness and, you know, therapeutic support through many, many different modalities. We provide that financial support to make sure that they can help themselves. So
when you say that, say more about what that means. So,
for example, under the programs that we offer support for line of duty death, non-line of duty death, all of the injuries that they are, you know, encounter while at work.
And when you say injuries, can you expand? Because people minimize their injuries, especially this population and their family members. they just do, they're supreme minimizer and deniers of unpleasant feelings.
Yes.
I mean, they're the best group at that.
And then one of the pieces is it a physical injury or is it a mental health related injury and or concern? And we facilitate and or help with both.
Okay.
So if it's a physical injury, and often they go hand in hand, and that's such an interesting thing because they don't realize that. So we have to remind them that, yes, I understand that, maybe you were shot and now you're going through some significant physical therapy, surgeries. That takes you out of work. And now you cannot, because of your injury and you can't use your shoulder or whatever the case is, which means you can't draw your weapon or you can't lift a gurney. You are now remanded to your home.
Or you can't mow your lawn.
Right. You're remanded to your home. And even though we've got you and we're checking on you and all that kind of stuff, you are inherently isolated, even if you're with your own family.
Right. And you're now helpless, where before you could run in and be the person. And now you actually need help.
Yes.
And that's a really hard transition for people who are the helpers and the fixers. Yes. I mean, it's really hard. That powerlessness is avoided at all cost. And the truth of the matter is they are powerless when they're healing from something like that. And it does a number on them emotionally and with their mental health, and they minimize that too.
They do. So we can start with supplying that financial support to them, and we do that on a monthly basis. We give them $500 a month as a supplement so that they can do the things that they need to do because they have a loss of pay, obviously, with premium pays or overtime or whatever the case is. But along that way, during those simple $500 checks every month, we're able to lay eyes on them. And then we can offer additional resources. And those are generally speaking related to mental health support. So it can be entry-level therapy and counseling to EMDR, to inpatient, outpatient, to ketamine treatment or a stellate ganglion block. Whatever that modality is that they need, we want to give them the opportunity to consider it. Because there isn't a quick fix or a one-stop shop kind of situation. You might have to try a few different things to make sure you find something that works for you.
And depending on the histories, that might take a lot longer. I mean, my experience working with first responders is they're not choosing that line of work for nothing.
No.
They're choosing that line of work because someone didn't help them or someone they love growing up, and they have a history of needing to adapt to switch that in their lives.
Yes.
And they need to go and do something and make a difference. And so they typically have a history of helplessness and or of not having people there for them when they need, and they want to go be those people. And so those moments of helplessness are then exacerbated in their experiences because they have a lot of them typically before they even become first responders.
Yes. And first responders need our help.
Right.
We are their backup. Right. And that's the one thing I think the community can do and your listeners can do is be their backup. Say thank you and appreciate them.
So when you think about the just overall impact of what, the detriment of mental health, and I don't think it's if, it's when with first responders, this is a big topic for us to continue to unpack. And I think that this is a great start, and I'm so glad that you're here. I look very forward to us continuing this conversation in a part 2. But I mean, we still have to talk about the betrayal trauma that people experience from their band of brothers. We've got to talk about proactive versus reactive response so that we're not chasing down things when they've already gotten so bad. We've got to talk about the extent to which this trauma for a first responder has a collateral effect on their family and everything else. So, and we've got to talk about how the community views first responders and, a bit of the bad press that police officers are getting, and why are they getting that bad press and what it's really about. So we have so much more to talk about related
But I can't wait to do it.
I'm so excited. I feel like we could do this for the whole day and never get done and just chop it into like 6 shows. But but I just can't thank you enough for being here and for your vulnerability and sharing your story with us, and then for just how you have made meaning out of the work that you've done and taken all of those experiences to help other families that have been unfortunate and bless them with potential connection and community and resources. So Angela, truly, you're a gift to this community. I'm so grateful to have gotten to know you, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, I've been truly honored, and I look forward to coming back.
Likewise, I'm so excited. So make sure that you tune in for our second episode. That'll drop in a couple of months. But thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to leave resources in the comments below to contact the 100 Club. You don't have to go through your departments if you're a first responder. You can go directly to them. A lot of people are concerned about that. So I want to make sure you know that about their resources. And they really just are a tremendous organization and really here for you as a first responder or a community member. And that means you can share this information. If you're hearing this and you know a first responder that could benefit from these services, really do reach out. That's what we're talking about. They need to not have this happen in a silo. We need to be there for them as they are for us. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you found this useful and helpful. And until we meet again, don't forget to lead with love. It'll never steer you wrong.